Welcome to the Live Your Possible podcast, the show about sparking and discovering endless possibilities where we work, live, and play. A safe place where we can help you peel back the cover to what may be blocking you from being your most authentic and happiest self.
Our guest today is a spark plug of possibilities. Dr. Alise Cortez is the Chief Ignition Officer at Gusto Now, a human and organizational transformation consultancy specializing in the activation of meaning and purpose to increase engagement, performance, innovation, retention, and thus profitability. She's a logotherapist and an organizational psychologist, inspirational speaker, researcher, author, and host of the Working on Purpose podcast. She is focused on helping companies, leaders, and individuals across the globe to live with gusto and make the most of their one precious life. Dr. Alise ignites humans wherever she goes. Take a listen and be ready for the lightning bolt of energy to go live your possible. Enjoy the show. Dr. Alise, it's great to see you and welcome to the Live Your Possible podcast. How are you?
I'm doing great, Dr. Darrin. It's great to be with you.
Well, hey, nice to be a counter doctor there. It's pretty funny, even though you're the PhD. But hey, it's a pleasure to be here. We are very much like-minded. I really enjoyed our episode on your podcast, and I thought we had a really good conversation. I'm excited to get this going here as well to continue our chat.
Likewise, I like to call you doctor because you feel like a doctor to me.
Well, thank you. I see so many similarities, and one of the things we have in common is we love the word purpose, and it gives us direction. And I'd love for you to share with the audience, what is your purpose today, and what, where does that come from?
Okay, so my purpose is to awaken passion and purpose in individuals and organizations, and then encourage them to persevere and pursue that mightily to make a contribution worthy of their one precious life. So really it's about that's why I call myself a chief ignition officer. I light people up. A lot of people have forgotten that they can do these things, and I understand, or they didn't know they could at all. And so how do I do that in the world? So what I really do is a lot of probably what you do in the world, and that is helping to activate meaning and purpose in cultures and leadership inside organizations who want to be able to get the lift for their people that translates to higher engagement, more creativity, retention, et cetera, which of course, as you know, goes straight to the bottom line. So that's how it shows up in the world. And of course, I love to speak about this stuff. I write books about this stuff. Nobody's safe, right, for talking about this with me.
Yeah, you carry such a passion about it too, and you have 4 books out there. The one which is I saw you recently in Barnes and Noble signing away, and it's getting great reviews there. And we'll definitely spend a little bit of time on that because I'd love to dive into that and talk about what's showing up for you there, because I know there's a lot of good sources and a lot of good stories. As you said, the results are there.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that. And, it's always interesting. People always want to know, like when I'm out speaking, people are like, there's like a desperacy. How did you find your purpose? How did you discover it? And because they want to figure it out for themselves. And it's definitely a journey, and it started for me, Darrin, really quick. The short version of the story is it started in my mid-20s. It started to become awakened in my mid-20s. I'd grown up in a small town in northeastern Oregon. I was living in Portland, Oregon. I was studying in college. I didn't go to college till I was later in life. And when I was living in Spain and Brazil for a total of 3 years, I had a boyfriend who had a really big job, and I didn't have a visa. So I just spent my time traveling all over Western Europe and South America with him, learning Spanish and Portuguese and continuing my college work. And what I discovered, and I had a live-in maid, a chauffeur, a gardener, a really amazing life, really, on the outset. And there were so many amazing things about it, except there was just one little eensy-beensy problem. I was miserable for a lot of that. And what I discovered is we humans are not wired just to consume life, as beautiful and opulent as that life may be. What we need is to be of service to others. That is when we're our most vital. So unbeknownst to me, I had learned what an existential vacuum is, which is what we know about in the world of logotherapy, which I have a degree in that as well. And so that emptiness of, just being in the world without mattering, without serving, is where this whole thing got kicked off. And I knew then that I was going to ultimately get a PhD in human development with Fielding Graduate University, and I did pursue that. And then that was really in my early 30s, that was really the answer to the early midlife crisis when I came back to the States. And I was comfortable and had a good job and a nice car and all, but is that it? All there is? Their substance was missing, right? So I didn't have an affair, I didn't buy a sports car, I got a PhD. Anyway, so that's just really where it started from. And then from there, I can tell you as we weave in some of these, light up moments, how it got continued down the path. But that's where it got ignited. I knew I wanted to work and develop humans. So the PhD was a start to that. And that was back in the late 1990s.
Yeah, I love the chief ignition officer too, lighting up. You had a lot of similarities there. Love it. Now, what were there some examples that you recognize in yourself that you saw some different light up moments, maybe how you were interacting or how you were working with different people that you saw this connection?
Yeah, so first in the late 1990s, I was in Seattle, Washington. And at that time, every job was technology. And I found myself as an account manager placing IT people. And I was like, this is great. My product is people. This is perfect. And then that's when I really got into organizational development kind of matters and learning and development, employee engagement. It just kind of went on from there. But some of the light up moments that really allowed the path to further unfold, if you will. And I like to think about it, Darren, like this. I really think that when you're in touch with yourself and you're listening to yourself, you can hear the voice in your head, heart, and soul that's telling you where to put your next foot on the next lily pad. It's right there. Put it right there. And so I started teaching on the side as an adjunct at the University of Phoenix. I think it was in 2011. And as soon as I did that, it's like, oh, I'm back in school. I love this. This is so great. I love academia. I love studying. And that totally told me, okay, Cortez, you got to go back and you got to revisit the dissertation research you did for your PhD, which was on meaning and work and identity. And now you can expand that. So I interviewed 25 IT people for that for the PhD. So I went crazy. I mean, I was so lit and on fire with this idea. I went out and interviewed 115 men and women across 20 different professions, and I ended up finding these 15 modes of engagement. And once that happened, then I was totally on the meaning track. I knew more about meaning than most people did because of the research and all of the analysis that I did for that. And that set me down a really, really strong path to really pursue the meaning stuff. And then that was 2014 when I was going to present at a conference in India and also get it published. So that 1 year, what happened is here I am, I've discovered this stuff. I'm feeling, that feeling when you're stepping into your shine. This is where you're supposed to be. This is life pulling you up and just taking you along. It was like that. And so I already knew I was going to go to this conference in India to present my research at this business conference in December. And I had the opportunity to present the research at a new client in November of that year, and they loved it. And I'd done this, this was like my first real work where I presented my own ideas, my own research, and they ate it up. So I'm high as a kite driving home from this workshop, and my phone rings. And I kid you not, Darren, it's Voice America. And they're calling saying, hey, we found you on LinkedIn. We went to your website. We see that you're a consultant, a speaker. It usually makes for a good host. Would you like to host your own show? And I held the phone away from my ear and I'm like, oh my, this is all connected. This is all connected. And so I said, I'm going to say a hot yes to that. And then I went off to India and had the 3-week experience, the India experience that people have that was spiritually elevating and such. And so now I'm squarely on the meaning and purpose path. And that's the beginning of 2015. So those were a couple things that were major, major light up moments. The last one I'll say that really made a big, big difference in all of this is when I got divorced in 2016, which wasn't my idea. And I can cover that for some of the learnings later, but it was a really good idea. But that gave me a clearing just to go for it. There's nobody that I really, except for my daughter, I was taking care of at the time. It's like, just go for it, Cortez. Just take the Band-Aid off, take the little trainer wheels off and go.
Congratulations on all of that. And yeah, sometimes you got to go through some of those tough moments to set yourself free, truly. Curious about the lily pad. It seems like it might have been insecure, unstable. So I'm curious, how do you take those steps? Like, how did you just get to that point where you could just say, wow, I see this so clearly and not have that level of limiting belief or doubt? Like, how did you just go for it?
That's a great question. In all the instances that I was telling you about so far, I just couldn't not do it. It just was so compelling, so grabbing for me that I just couldn't say no. I couldn't deny it. I am a single person now and I support myself. So that's a different manner altogether. And there's way more risk in this, especially as you know, when you've created your own products and services and now you have to market them and sell them and then deliver them. There's way more risk. And so I've certainly have tempered some of that a little bit over time, but those ones that I told you about, they were it was such a loud screaming call. I couldn't not answer it.
That's beautiful. I guess I could relate because I went halfway across the world to a happiness at work conference in Copenhagen, and I was asking myself on the way there, should I be going here, leaving my family? And there were signs all along the way, to your point, saying you're where you need to be right now. It's beautiful, and having the courage to go through with it. And you talk about meaning. Can you help our audience understand what that looks like? Maybe even what it looked like back in 2014 to now, because I think things have evolved.
Yeah, so I'm going to give it to you from two different vantage points. One from, when I was doing the research, I was asking people what did they find meaningful in their work and how did it relate to their sense of self. And so when I did the coding, people would tell me, the things that they found meaningful, and I would code them along Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And so when they said things like, you know, I love that I can provide a fantastic, living for my family. Well, that's security. That's a security thing. I feel proud of what it is that I do, proud of my abilities. That's an esteem level. When they say things like, I get to live and work my values, that there's a values level in there. Some people talked about purpose. So I was able to start to code. And what I discovered was that the higher in the hierarchy that they experienced their work, the way more meaningful it was, and the way more likely it was going to be really important to their sense of identity and self, or it would be either inseparable or really resonant. And the less it was, of course, it would be detached or just expressing themselves. It's a fascinating relationship. So I coded the meaning on that level. Now, later, when I became a logotherapist because of my degree in logophilosophy, we look at meaning from the vantage point of it being the chief concern that we humans have in life. It is also our chief source of energy. Meaning is our chief source of energy. It also, according to logotherapy, we have three sources of meaning, and one is the contributions which are always registered along that which we value. So what you find meaningful, Darrin, will be different from what I find meaningful because our values are different. So the first source is creative, and that's what we give of ourselves to the world. That's important to us. I call that passion. Second source is what experiences and encounters that do we have in the world that are important to us. I call that inspiration. And the third one is the attitudinal stance that we take when life throws at us, whatever it is it's going to throw at us. We have the ability to choose that, and I call that mindset. So when you're clear about, that the more that you can actually activate those three sources on a regular, moment by moment basis, not occasionally, but every day, and ideally moment by moment, the more energized and vital you will be. That's what people don't understand about meaning, is they don't understand that it's such a tremendous source of energy and motivation.
Yeah, it's energizing. The name of your book, revitalizing, right? It's truly self-sufficient.
Yeah, it's intrinsic motivation. It's that little engine that keeps going because of its, internal combustion source.
Yeah, that's so cool. And I love how you kind of built it on our basic needs, right? We need to have our needs in place, be able to know that we're okay and that we can persevere and push forward and do different things and challenge ourselves. And I also know you talk about in different avenues about transcendence, which it gets to that point where we're able to connect differently, spiritually, and with different meaning. And I really, really appreciate that you state our meanings are really different based on our values. I think it's so important that everybody needs to know that my meaning is different than your meaning, and we get energized a bit differently. Even though we have a lot of similarities and we're in a similar space, we do this a little bit differently.
Yeah. Yeah. And, both of us obviously clearly value learning and education, or else we wouldn't have each written our research and written our own books. But back on the self transcendence idea, I mean, that is definitely a logotherapy term, but it really speaks to what I was telling you about the Brazil story, Spain and Brazil story. So self means transcending above the self. And so whenever you are in service of other people, to other people, you've transcended yourself. And now you have the opportunity to really feel that wonderful, elevating feeling of meaning because you're mattering, and everybody wants to matter. They want to make an impact. And then, as you know, right, so this thing about purpose is so fascinating, right? So I've had people conflate meaning and purpose. They're not the same thing. What you find meaningful can lead you to your purpose, but they're not the same thing. And so for me, I always think about purpose as it's something that you're always in service of someone else. It's not about you. It's about how you're helping other people. Now, you might win secondarily by performing that, but it's always about serving other people. And I don't have it committed to memory, but Alicia Hare, who's been on my program, has a beautiful way of describing purpose that it speaks to the fullness of our potential, that when we guide it and give ourselves over to it, we can realize our full potential when we're in service of that. And I think that's why, to me, identity and purpose are so intimately connected, and why I believe I started studying identity and then I found myself at purpose later on.
Yeah, our identity, it really is essential to what we're connected, what our actions are, to what we're following through on. And I mean, the purpose, you're saying the purpose is an extension of that?
Yeah, I think purpose is the most pure expression of your identity.
Nice. That's, yeah, well said. Now, as far as purpose, when you're out speaking, do you feel people have a purpose, or are they looking at you like, oh my God, don't pick me? Or do you get a sense people out there understand what this means, and do people have it? Do you sense?
Well, I do ask most of my audiences, how many people do you believe know your purpose? And invariably it really is about, maybe 3 to 4% of an audience, maybe 5%. And people they feel sheepish, or not ashamed, but kind of like disappointed that they don't know their purpose. I'm like, don't do that to yourself. It is a process. But I can tell you, I remember years ago, I had Karen Hoyas on my program, and she's a little firecracker. And she wrote a book, I think it's called The Quest for Purpose. But she said, and we talked about it on air, she said only 1% of the globe is fully living their purpose right now. She said, when we get to 3%, and we will, because people are working at it, people are now aware that they can get it. She said, when we get to 3%, human consciousness will be raised such that peace is actually possible. Well, I think that's worth getting up for and working toward. So yeah, I do. I talk a lot about purpose in my talks, and people love it. They're so inspired and encouraged by that, and they want it for themselves. And yet, yes, I see there's a tremendous opportunity to help more people either discover that or get that presence for themselves.
Yeah, I think you're igniting people to see that in themselves, and to get comfortable with what that purpose might be. And can you give maybe just a simple step or two for folks to think about how they can identify their purpose, or maybe just connect to something to practice with?
Yeah, great question. So, I think Nick Craig was on my program some years ago. He's a purpose guy too. And he says purpose has been leading you your whole life. You just didn't know it, didn't recognize it, because it's just so natural, this water that you swim in kind of thing. And I think a lot of people really do have an idea of their purpose, but they don't think of it as their purpose, because they think it's supposed to be this really big, like on the mountaintop kind of thing, and maybe just look at, if you first, you can ask your friends or people that know you well, you know, who am I being in the world? Describe what that looks like. And if they say, well, you're always the person that's cheering people up. You're always the person that's lifting the crowd. Okay, well, maybe part of your purpose is that you are a lifter, that your job is to elevate in life. Maybe you're the problem solver. Every people have an issue, and you're like, oh, I know what to do about that. So if you start just looking at who am I naturally being in the world, you might glimpse that there is an element of purpose to that. You just didn't see it that way. The other thing, though, about it is it really should light you up. It should really cause you to feel like you're leaning to the end of your skis when you're in the activity surrounding this. It shouldn't make you feel dull and like this is my job. If it doesn't lift you, then you're not on the right track. So looking at the kinds of activities that that just give that to you is a second way you can start on this stuff.
I love being in front of your skis. That's a great visual. And how about if I have limiting beliefs, or maybe I have too much negative noise going on in my head?
Oh, I have it too, man. I doubt myself on, a fairly regular basis. Like, whose idea was this anyway, right? Join the crowd. The opportunity though and I just had a great guest on my program talking about this, Maya Devici. Anyway, she wrote a book called The Possible Self, which I know you would love. Anyway, we all have limiting beliefs, ruminative, negative beliefs that say we can't or we're not good enough, and why would anybody want to do this with us or whatever. It's just what it is to be human. And she really taught me that we do need to intervene in those. We need to really own them, get them on the table and say, yep, I have that belief. It's right there. And then we have to actually redirect it in our heads, but also our bodies. I mean, I learned so much from her about how to really change the way that we think. We have to involve our emotions, our mind, our body. It's our wants, which is our motivation. It's amazing. I mean, and it's a pretty complex process, and I don't think that most of us are equipped to do this by ourselves. So that's why I believe in the power of coaching.
Yeah, and I also really appreciate one of the things I've, just hearing you talk and then, reading your book and just our last conversation. You have so many sources on the top of your mind. So everything you say with a suggestion and how we live life or how we can do something, it's sourced and it's real and it's possible. Love that.
Yeah, I love, some of my very best friends are sitting out there in my front living room. They're disguised as these thing called books. It's going to take over my whole house at some point, but
Yeah, I mean, like I read your book, right? So I have all these nice notes. I was reading it on the beach earlier this year. And I got to tell you, I was just smiling throughout reading the book and how it could impact the world. As you talk about having purpose, not only for us individually, but for our company. As we have this for our company and connecting the dots with individuals, that can help us get to that 3%. I can only imagine. So I'm super excited to talk about your book if you'd like to go there.
I spent enough time researching and writing it. Sure, we can talk about it.
Yeah, speaking of research, right? Yeah, the book is called The Great Revitalization, and we'll have a picture up on the screen. I'd love for you just to talk about the two parts and, how you felt about writing this. And I'd love to know, just jump right in there for a second and then just kind of what you're feeling about it now.
So how I wrote it, like my other book, Purpose Ignited, is that I just, each week on the podcast, I read the book cover to cover in preparation for the show. I take about 25 pages of typewritten notes from the book, and that becomes my research funnel. And as I just kept percolating in the authors that I'd had on the last couple of years, I was like, I feel like I need to write something that will help people understand how much the world and the workforce has radically changed largely since the pandemic, not just because of the pandemic, but largely, in relation to the pandemic. And so that was the impetus for writing it, as I felt like I had learned so much and I was folding in these things in my own consulting as I was going and helping more companies to discover and articulate their purpose. And then we would thread it into their culture. So it would, really fortify and enliven the operations. And I was seeing this stuff work. I was like, we got to share this with more people. Because I could tell that leaders were really frazzled and didn't understand. They couldn't figure out why people didn't seem to want to come to work, didn't want to give their best, didn't want to stay. And they were just, they were trying the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. So that's why I wrote the book, was to, the first part is, the gusto components, helping them get the lay of the land of what the workforce wants today. And then I was like, well, I don't want to just leave them with that. How about if we then, I start to give them an idea of what they can do about that. So part two is 3 chapters that are organized around intellectual intelligence, emotional intelligence, and spiritual intelligence, believe it or not, that they can employ into their culture and their practices to start to create a place. Ideally, what I want them to do is to create a destination workplace. So that's why and how I wrote the book. And then I really saw it as, this is kind of my template, my way to be able to start conversations with leaders and organizations to help them see where they're missing the mark, where they can actually improve.
Yeah, Gusto Now. Well, the hyphen in the middle is your website too. So I love that connection.
I had so much fun with that. I've never done anything. I was inspired by my dear, I would call him a mentor, and someone I at least know somewhat socially, Dr. Raj Sisodia. He does a lot of things with acronyms.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, Gusto Now is part one is Gusto, the what. Then the part two is the how, which is the now, which is so fun. Because again, you're showing people how to do this. You give them a lot of research in their resources, and it's really a nice guide for folks that they really want to revitalize their organization. As you said in your subtitle, how activating meaning and purpose could radically enliven your business. And I love that word, enliven.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate that you got this. That what I'm, and my business is Gusto Now. That's what I call my business, and the reason I call it that, Darrin, is that When I lived in Spain and Brazil and I learned those cultures and those languages, they became a part of me. So I still
Mm.
speak Spanish and Portuguese comfortably. I love what those cultures taught me. They've lifted me, they've informed my sense of self and person. And gusto means pretty much the same thing in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. And it has to do with oomph and energy and zest and all those fun words that I love to help activate in people.
Revitalization. It sounds like you have like a little bit of a dancing element to that too. Is that part of what goes into your work?
Oh, totally. I've been playing with the tango for a while. I saw that when I was in Argentina, when I lived in Brazil, and until I broke my foot a month ago. I don't know if you know that. I broke my foot a month ago. So I've been hobbling around on crutches and my little scooter. But before that happened, I was taking tango lessons. I am still taking improv classes. In fact, I have a performance this Sunday with my class. So yeah, absolutely. I want to help more people dance and play with life and open up and shine.
Yeah, open up, play. I mean, dancing through life is amazing. Just that perspective. We're all different at it. I mean, I know I look awful, yet I have a blast doing it. I'm not Elaine from Seinfeld yet, I have a lot of fun out there. So we just got to put ourselves out there, right? It's like we got to try different things.
You're reminding me, you say you look awful out there. I don't know. I'm also taking singing classes, by the way, because I'm an ordained minister and I'm going to marry my niece in September, and I'm going to sing her and her fiance a song. It's going to be John Legend's All of Me. So I'm taking singing lessons too. But years ago, before I got married, I loved to go out dancing with my girlfriend, and I was in Seattle dancing at this bar, having a great time. And I walk off the dance floor toward the bar to leave, and so this man stops me and grabs my arm and he says, "You were way off back there." And I was like, I thought, are you trying to get my phone number? Because if you are, it's not working. I don't care if I'm off. I was having a great time. Let go of my arm.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great, right? We have to really enjoy our space. We have to be silly, let our hair down, and just really enjoy the world, the beauty that's out there. As you probably read in my book about, I had over 10 years of dancing in dance recitals for my daughter, but it was dancing dads. So we had a blast doing it, and it was quite the experience. And just the fact of getting out there, just to show the vulnerability, even just for my own daughter or for all of our daughters, it sent such a message. But the power of what I love behind all of it is mostly the connection we had by doing something for somebody else.
Yes, that's the self-transcendence again. Yeah.
I know, right?
Yeah, it's pretty yummy.
Yeah. So one of the things I just opened up to your book in the O for ownership culture that unites all stakeholders through purpose. And a word that I circled here, and I'd just love to get your perspective on it, is regenerative fulfillment. Those two words, and what your take is on that.
For one, let me back up and say that, by 2030, the majority of the workforce will be comprised of Gen Y, which are the millennials, and Gen Z. And they insist on having meaningful work and being part of an organization that they can feel proud of, that ideally aligns with their values. They're not going to just go get a job just to make money. It's just not how they're wired.
Yeah.
So when people, and this is why I love doing the work that I do, Darrin, helping organizations to articulate their purpose and thread it into their operations, when everybody really understands, it's not something they read on the wall over here on this purpose statement, but everybody knows down to the last toenail why this organization exists and why anybody should care. And they know they're part of it because they have that sense of belonging. They know that they're making an impact. They know that their role, their contribution matters. That's that regenerative piece. It's that back to that, battery that just keeps getting recharged because of the constant reinforcement, the constant juice of the meaningfulness piece of it. So for me, I've done this a few times at organizations just in the last year and a half. And where you watch organizations really come alive and that you can feel that limbic resonance of everyone inside, where their brains are connected and firing on the same level because they all feel connected. That is what I'm talking about. It's fantastic.
It's beautiful. Throughout your book, you talk about how we're really bringing back humanity. And if you could, speak about that a little bit more, because I know that feeds directly into that.
So one of the things that I've done just recently as I was updating my website is I really say that what we're doing at Gusto now is we're doubling down on humanity. And the reason why I say that is because we've become so uber obsessed with AI and ChatGPT and all how technology is going to change things and take jobs, etc. But what I'm out to do with and through my work is if we help people become more human and we help them really understand and better assume that all the fullness of that. I mean that, emotionally, relationally, spiritually. That is how we distinguish ourselves from technology. And the more we can do that, the more enriching and vital our existence is. So part of what I'm doing is through my program, my leadership program is Vitally Inspired. That's for executives and culture. And then Managing Through Meaning is for managers, is to teach some of that in the way alongside all the practical skills they have to have. But how do you actually communicate and give direction in a way that vitalizes people and doesn't diminish them? I mean, that's the opportunity. So yeah, I'm huge in this idea of, doubling down on humanity.
And you thread this nicely throughout the book. I really encourage folks to get the book because it's a beautiful read. As I've at least mentioned to you, I giggled throughout reading this book. And it's not a book full of jokes. It was just like I get it. I'm connected with you so deeply that it's just so powerful, and it's refreshing to see, what you put out to the world. So thank you again for that. And there's words like possibilities and right, living with awe, seeing the beauty, having people step in and really have their fulfilled selves be enlightened and enlivened, like we mentioned. And you talk about joy and happiness. And I want to ask you, when we think about happiness, how do you see happiness in the workplace today? Like, what does that look like from what you've seen?
I love this. I was actually just thinking about this because of my conversation that I had with my podcast guest, Maya Divich. She wrote The Possible Self, and I like and align with how she distinguishes happiness and joy. And so, you know, really for me, I want happiness in the workplace for sure. I also want joy. But happiness from both of our vantage points is really, it speaks to, it's kind of it's a current moment. It's a responsive emotion to something that is either good or heading you toward, a goal of yours, or maybe it's something, that's nice, but not necessarily imperative. So there's a nice lifting quality to it. For me, if when I distinguish joy, joy is a much more profound emotion, and it speaks to, and Dr. Maya says the same thing. It's really connected to when you're advancing along something that's like a core potential for you, something that is core in what you're trying to do with yourself in your life, and when you feel like you're on track for that, and you're being who you want to be in relation to that, then you can experience joy. And that is this really profound sort of, way of being in the world. I'm actually developing another course around some of these higher kinds of emotions like we're talking about, just because I see how important it is. So I want to see more happiness in the workplace. I hate it when I walk into an organization and I feel this awful deadness, this thud, just devoid of any
Yeah.
energy. And then when I go in and I can feel that limbic resonance really, tracking, and the energy is vital and people are laughing and you can feel the movement. Oh, that's more of the joy part of it.
Yeah. And it's possible when you start to see that. And as you think about purpose and meaning and the future of work, tie in joy or any other element you think is really relevant, like how does that show up for you when you think about 10, 15 years from now and what we're trying to do? We're trying to influence change today to help really folks imagine what is possible in the future. What does that look like?
Well, I am somewhat surprised, I guess, that there aren't more organizations that better even fully embrace just what we're talking about right here. Let's just call the meaning part, being able to, create a workplace, forget it being a destination workplace, but a workplace where people really feel like they're valued, and that they know that they feel like they're part of something important that matters to their sense of self. I want that to become just more of a mainstay. But I am not going to quit shooting for this notion that we can really reach for those higher stars of our humanity, those, what Maslow would call those higher attitudinal B values. He said they were things like compassion and unity and such, but I'm adding things like the gratitude, joy, wonder, awe in there. So I want that whole thing to be what the forward-reaching organizations and companies are doing to pull the rest of us along. And of course, I want to work with those organizations. I don't know a whole lot about Eileen Fisher, the women's fashion clothier company, but from what I do know is they're way out there ahead in terms of their their evolution, their in their consciousness, and how they work with and teach their employees. I would love to do some work with them. They're just, best in class in so many ways. So working with those kind of organizations that are pulling the rest of us along is kind of what I would hope to see.
Yeah, making that a reality. Like I think about that self-actualization as you go up the hierarchy, and it allows us to open the door. And when I think about awe and wonder and being able to actually be courageous enough to look out and be expansive and create that space, that to me, that is where that level of transcendence comes in. And I don't know if you had those experiences when you're in India, but some of my learning as far as folks talking about when people even greet each other in India, it's about seeing the light in each other, being able to see the beauty, seeing what is possible and not what gets in the way today.
Yeah, you know what's so interesting is I'm a Gallup certified strengths coach, and I do a lot of, strengths building, team building sessions and such. And it's fascinating. One of the 34 strengths is one called connectedness, and it's this ability to be able to see all the invisible threads. I'm really big into this idea of interdependence and oneness, et cetera. That's part of my spiritual dimension and where I'm going in my consciousness. And so the connectedness strength does really speak to that. And what's fascinating is when I'm doing sessions, oftentimes people of Indian descent end up with connectedness in their top 5. Not so much we Americans, but Indians, yes. So yeah, there's this whole, it's a collectivist society. We're individualistic. So that I think already contributes to that. But I had, I learned about 25 words of Tamil when I was there because I was in the southern part of India. I went around with my little scoop pad and said, how do you say hello, goodbye, thank you? And it's just so beautiful. Like you greet somebody with, not namaste in the South, but vanakam.
Mm,
And it's this beautiful way of connecting and, being with someone. It's so beautiful. Language is so important.
it really is. One of the things I recall too, even just you talk about language, it's coming to mind as we were in Hawaii last year, just the spiritual connection of someone saying aloha. And just imagine if we started our speaking engagements with aloha. People might look at us like, what? But the point is, it's about connecting as humans with love and it's spirituality. It's a much deeper hello. It's from the heart. It's not just saying it to say it.
Yeah. And it stops the moment for just a moment and requires you to be present.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, for when I think about some of the things you're doing too, and I have not read your other books, but I did look at them. They look pretty inspiring. And one of the themes, I don't know if this is true or not, I read components of it where it talks about how to overcome challenges or overcome pain, almost like turning pain into a greater purpose. I don't know if there's a message or two that you'd want to share about those books that might pique the interest of some others, and just how do we take something that maybe was painful or maybe we lack a level of worthiness or something to turn it maybe into something more positive or our purpose.
Mm. So that's what you're talking about is this book, Coloring Life,
Yes.
and its subtitle is How Loss Invites Us to Live More Vibrant Lives. And what this book is about, Darrin, is this is a book that I wrote to capture and celebrate my experience of losing both of my parents 28 days apart in January 2019. And the story itself is already relatable to people and it helps them already process and navigate their own pain. But then the part 2 of that book is the 7 whispers of wisdom that I got about living life from those losses. And it is, of course, heavily informed from being a logotherapist, somebody who has studied logophilosophy. One of the reasons that I was attracted to the idea of logophilosophy is that it teaches, it's an optimistic way of living and being in the world. And it teaches that there are no negative or tragic circumstances that one experiences that can't be transmuted into a positive accomplishment, but for the stand we choose to take to them. There's so much empowerment in that. One thing that's been so fascinating, Darrin, as I've been hobbling around on crutches in this little scooter, I'm attracting people who have had they've had crutches or they've had a major accident. And they've been telling me about these, really critical aspects or experiences in their lives. It's just really opened something. And I look at them and some of these, I've been moved to tears several times as they talk to me. And I'm present to the indomitable aspect, the ferocity of the human spirit, that there's so much we can overcome. And part of the reason I love logotherapy is that what it's really doing is, one, we're helping people to activate meaning in their own life, but we're also teaching them how to just reach into those natural spiritual resources that are available to in assault, regardless of whether or not you are a believer in any religion or anything like that. It's not connected to religion or faith, but that you have this capacity in you all the time to persevere through whatever life throws at you. And in so doing, you exhibit a grace that inspires and lifts other people. as well as yourself. And I think that is incredible. And I'm getting more and more of that. I might keep my scooter and my crutches after this is all healed up. I don't know.
I really appreciate you bringing it back to we have more control than we know. You know, we're empowering, you're really encouraging us to take the steps to put ourselves out there. And, you know, we're connecting with the world in different ways. You know, we're seeing it in ways that will truly light us up to go back to that. So I really appreciate you letting us know that, you know, we all have the opportunity. We all can do this. We just got to put ourselves on that lily pad, that first step, and then kind of move from there.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's a big part of what I'm doing in my work is people need inspiration. They need encouragement, right? This is the world we live in today. People need that. I'm very happy to supply that.
Well, I in the world thanks you. And I had to ask you this question too, because I'm impressed by how many books you're reading, how you're applying this to everything you do. You're a dancer, even with a bad leg or a bad foot. You're singing, which I won't ask you to do that.
Thank you. We don't want to scare people off.
But what other fun things do you do in your day that keeps energizing you? I know all that feeds your soul. I could sense. Is there anything else that you're doing to, you know, keep you going?
Well, before I broke my foot, I'm a big, I believe heavily exercise is an important part of my life. So running and being at the gym is very important. Travel is huge for me. I love traveling and going to different cultures. I think it's one of the best things that you can do to feel more connected to the world, to learn from other cultures, to connect with other cultures. I was just in Napa, California with my daughter a few weeks ago. Amazing. Yes, I love wine, stopped at several wineries. Another thing that really does also bring me a lot of happiness is just my daughter. She's 21, and I just love that she wants to spend time with me. She chooses to spend time with me, and I'm so grateful for that. And we have a lot of fun when we're together. We travel together, and I'm very grateful for that. I do not know what I ever did to deserve her, but I'm very grateful for her.
Oh, sounds like you both make a great pair.
Well, I'm going to renew the lease. I'm not going to give her back.
You know, I guess when you're out traveling or you're out doing these fun things, like how do you slow down and just really enjoy what's in front of you?
Well, I have a knack for really being able just to stop and talk with people wherever I go. And I don't mean I'm just saying, hi, how's your day? I mean, it's oftentimes a really, really intimate kind of discussion about their lives and who they're being. And the really cool thing is sometimes if that's, broken English or in their, whatever their language might be that I can't speak. So I love connecting with people on that real level. And what I found is if you ask people something like, what are you most proud of in your life? That's a different conversation than what do you do? Or I ask, what do you pour yourself into? And why is that important to you? That's a different question than what do you do? And so I like to have those kinds of questions. And everywhere I go, I have those kinds of conversations. I have them with the person that serves me at the restaurant. I mean, I've given my business card to many people, many servers, because I've gotten invested into their store. I'm like, I need to hear more about that. So that's another thing that I teach in my programs is it's amazing how far you can go with curiosity. To be genuinely curious about somebody else, their life, what they've navigated, what they've learned from that is infinitely interesting to talk about.
Yeah, I love the word curiosity. As you know, I love how you added genuinely in front of that,
Yeah.
intentionally.
Yeah.
That's purposeful, which is great. I also recall, I think it was on your podcast. Do I have this right that you would stop and say something to people that show that they're in love too?
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, one of my so I told you the three sources of meaning, one of them is passion. What are you putting of yourself into the world that matters to you? And I love to when I'm out in public, I love to stop a woman and tell her that she's beautiful. Invariably, she's very surprised by that. It has to be genuine, sincere, but I go looking for someone to say something to. My daughter's like, "All right, let's just get this done. Who's it going to be?" She knows. But I also really love going up to couples that I see connected. And I love to come up and say, I want you to know that I saw you from across the room and I can see your love radiating from across the room. It's just beautiful. How long have you been together? Who picked up on who first? How'd you get together? And they love it. They invariably they're waiting for the next interview question, go ahead, what's the next thing? But I love to do that. And invariably they feel more connected by someone having seen them. They feel like, oh yeah, maybe we do have something special here. And of course I'm trying to encourage that. It's
Yeah, you're
beautiful.
lighting everybody up.
Yeah, and that's definitely so going back to your other question about finding your purpose, that is definitely part of my purpose. I am an encourager. I am an igniter.
Yeah. I can imagine people's eyes open up and their heart opens up. They're like, oh my God, who is this person? But wow, she's amazing.
I've had people ask me, who are you? I did this at a beautiful restaurant before I took my daughter and her boyfriend to the symphony a few weeks ago. And I saw these couples, and one I came up to and said, I went to her first. I said, what do you love about this man? And she said, I can be just who I am across my whole life in its entirety with him. It could be all of me. And I turned and looked to him and I asked, what do you love about this woman? And he was already moved to tears. So I put my hand on his shoulder. I said, what do you love about this woman? And he said, I can't imagine a day of my life without her. I mean, come on. Who's up for a conversation like that? Come on, right? Let's go.
My whole body's tingling right now. That's pretty cool.
Isn't it great?
Oh
I
my
do that
gosh.
all the time. This is standard for me. I love this. And this, Darrin, this is what I mean by when you stoke your own meaning sources, those 3 sources of meaning, you purposely this is what I'm teaching in my programs inside companies. You live in that that energizing buzz, and it goes with you everywhere. And then you infect other people with that. That's how I carry that's what continues to carry me. The more I do those kinds of things, the more energy that I have for researching and writing and creating programs and doing programs. And, it's just it's that ongoing revitalizing, rejuvenation energy source we were talking about.
Yeah, I ask folks that are listening to try it out. Try something. Maybe not to the level Dr. Alise is doing today. Maybe you'll get there someday, but just try one of these items out. You might be surprised what happens. You might be amazed when people react in a different way than you probably ever imagined, and the impact that you could have. Dr. Alise, I'd like to ask you one last question about when you think about the line, live your possible. What does that mean to you? And what are some final words you'd like to give our audience about how they too can live their possible?
What a great question. What a great way to finish. Well, I first I'm going to say that I think a lot of people really struggle with the idea of living your possible. I think a lot of people are afraid of that. That feels really, really big and overwhelming and scary. And yeah, it is, because when you really see your full potential and just how beautiful and impactful you can be, it's like, wow, that is amazing, right? And so I think that, you do have to have help. I mean, I had to have help with people illustrating my possible to me. I had a boss fire me because he said, you can't stay here. You can do so much more. I was 19 years old. I had no idea the things he just said that I could do. And I did realize all of them, but I couldn't see them without him telling me. But once he said them, I was like, oh, that's interesting. So I think it helps. That's why I believe so much in the power of work, Darrin. It's the playground where we can realize our potential, especially when we're led by inspirational leaders who are looking. They've been taught how to teach and go looking for what's amazing about their people, and then to lead them to where they could be, not where they could be tomorrow or today, but where are they going? Where could they go? And being led by someone like that is incredible. So to me, living your possible really speaks to first honoring yourself, loving yourself enough to give yourself over to those experiences, putting yourself into situations, places, and experiences and companies where you get more of the opportunity to be stirred like that by an inspirational leader who believes in you and who will give you challenges to be able to continue to grow. And then choose your association in your personal life very carefully too. So you're not around people who say, why would you want to do that? Why would you want to work that hard? Why would you want to go do that? Why don't you stay with me here, on the sofa kind of thing? Unless the sofa is where you need to be for the moment. Right. So to me, there's so much action in the, living your possible, and it's pulling, and the more that you give yourself over to it, the more energized you are to keep going.
Yeah, it's expansive and it's amazing.
Yeah, it is expansive.
Yeah, and Dr. Alise, I'm honored to really call your friend, to be on your podcast, to have you join our podcast here at Live Your Possible. I'm inspired about everything you do. You really move me in the way you do it, how you really aligned resources, your thinking to living an amazing life, really encouraging other people to step in it with you and maybe even dance with you at times if if people are ready for that. So thanks again for being on the show.
Thank you for having me, Darrin. It's wonderful. And I'm grateful to call you a friend as well.
That's all for today's episode. If you liked the show, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Live Your Possible dares to unlock your fullest potential and become an avenue for others to do the same. Join the community by visiting ignitehappy.com. It's time to discover endless possibilities with equal opportunity for all. See you again next week for more insights on how you can live your possible.